There we go. That's the voice I was looking for. So thank you for joining us today. A lot of us are curious about, the creator economy, but also a little bit of uncertainty. We keep hearing about it all the time. We hear about what does this actually looks like in practice? How do we build successful partnerships between newsrooms and creators? There's just a lot of questions up in the air. And so there are two fantastic people that are joining us today who have done that specifically and are going to share with us. So I'm going to let Mina kick us off and have a good conversation today.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to have a great call today with Jennifer Chang at the Houston Chronicle and with Shawn the Food Sheep, a creator that they've been working with. And this guy, I got to tell you, he makes me want to visit Houston, even in August. And if you know me, you know the humidity of Houston in August is like miserable. But this guy makes the food there look so good and tells me it's easy to get restaurant reservations in this heat. And I am contemplating a last minute trip. So I will talk to him about that after this call. Now, I know some of you joined us a month ago when we had the Philadelphia Inquirer on, and we talked about how they were approaching creator journalism, and that was by hiring a journalist to create content in-house. Now we're going to take a look at a little bit different method that the Houston Chronicle is doing and dig into how they got here and why they've chosen this approach. Now, the Chronicle has decided to partner with Shawn, who's outside the newsroom, and he's creating video content about Houston restaurants once a month. So it's a little bit different of a deal. Shawn's got a day job. Oh, and there's Ross from Philly coming in here. And then does this on the side. And we've got Jennifer Chang from the Houston Chronicle on here, as well as Shawn. And we will jump right in and talk to them about how things got started. So first, we'll start with a question for Shawn. Shawn, how did you get started making content and building an audience?
Sure. So I think it's like being a creator is kind of trial by fire. I feel like in the journalism world, you start off, you have a set of criteria, ethical standards, everything that you're kind of going in with. And so for me, I just set a goal to post every day for an entire year, starting in the summer of 2021. So I was doing my master's in business. Essentially, I just continued posting every day for the next, basically 5 years. And this is where we end up where we are today. A lot of learnings across the way. I was originally in Los Angeles. I moved back to Houston in January 2024. But it was definitely a lot of learning along the way. And especially during the 2020, 2021 period, I feel like that was the peak, not the peak of the creator economy, but that's like when it was a great time to join, just because interest rates were at zero. Tech companies had a lot of spend. So I had a chance to get a brand deal with Snapchat, where basically they just gave me a monthly retainer, and I was able to travel the world for 6 months. So it was definitely a great time to be there. But yeah, just been doing it for about 5 years now.
That sounds fantastic. Now, how long did your Snapchat deal last?
It was only 6 months, but so for context, Snapchat used to pay a lot. So that was my primary platform. So Snapchat, when they first started off in 2020, 2021, they were just paying relatively better compared to every other platform, just because they were competing. No one wanted to be on Snapchat, so I was one of the first food bloggers on Snapchat in 2021. And they found me through TikTok. I only had 15,000 followers. I don't know why they reached out to me at that time, but basically the monetization was so great, and that's a big reason why so many people were on Snapchat during that time. It's still the best monetization if you're good at it, but it's definitely harder than it used to be.
Now, have you ever worked with a newsroom before, or is the Chronicle your first newsroom partnership?
Yes, the first. I think there was like I did a one-off like video here or there with with a very niche magazine, maybe like, a couple years prior, but this is like a true consistent, journalism room that we are this is the first time. Yes.
And so, were you a reader, subscriber before, or what got you interested in working with the Chronicle? And then, how did they win you over? So, I
So
feel like
the
someone like you probably had a lot of people wanting to work with them.
So actually, funny enough, the Houston Chronicle, my family, before I moved out of Houston, like we used to get, the paper sent to us every single like every single morning. Like my dad used to read it. I used to read the sports section. I know. I think I told Jennifer, like John McClain. He was a Houston Chronicle sports writer. Like I used to read his stuff all the time growing up. And my grandfather actually so he moved here from Utah. He didn't have a college degree or anything, but he actually in the mornings used to throw out newspapers. Like that was his first job when they moved out to Houston. I don't know if they did. I'm assuming they did Houston Chronicle. I'll have to double check
Mhm.
that, but that was like one of his first jobs. So yeah, I don't know. It's just been a cool part of the story since the beginning, since my family moved to Houston.
Okay. So it sounds like you're a news guy who's always been interested in news on some level.
Yeah, I still read the Wall Street Journal, Politico Daily. I feel like journalism is, it needs to be protected. You guys are, I feel like it's becoming harder and harder for y'all almost daily. I know Jennifer, even in Houston, like yesterday, we dealt with there was like a reporter that maybe took free tickets or something. But I feel like for y'all, it's just getting tougher and tougher out there, especially just with everything going on.
Indeed. I feel like I've been in journalism 22 years now, and it's been dying, but also vibrant the whole time. Go
Yeah.
figure. All right, Jennifer, let's shift gears a little bit to you and talk about how the Chronicle thinks about working with creators. What kind of research you did as you were on the path towards partnering with Shawn?
Yeah, no, totally. I want to say too that like this is like what we are doing is I love that you last month you had a conversation about elevating like your internal journalists to and training them to be in front of like because I totally think that is part of like what every newsroom should have a two-prong approach with this is like you're training your internal staff, but then you're also thinking about experimenting outside of, your known universe because you may reach audiences that you're not able to reach just through these creators. And so I want to say that this is not the only way for sure. But I have to give a huge shout out to the American Press Institute because they allowed last year they had this influencer learning cohort, and as part of the cohort, you got a little bit of grant money to play around with, and that really like the newsrooms that participated in that. It was like we thought about like really deeply about what was important in these collaborations, like what is it that you're trying to achieve, like you had really stated goals, and of course like the folks at APR are all fantastic and they like walked us through all of that. So I think it really started getting us down this path of thinking about how we can sustainably collaborate with creators in a way that is ethical and makes sense. And so one of the first things is that like we talked about how like okay, we want to partner with someone who of course is like it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of like creators that live in Houston, but it's their audiences are too broad, they're too big, quite frankly. Like Christy Sarah is a really popular one. Like there's no way we're partnering with her because although I love her content and it's very chaotic, it's not quite the audience that I think we're looking for. Like we want someone who is a Houston creator who stands for the city of Houston, who like you said, Mina, inspires people to come visit the city. I think Houston is kind of this like large metro that suffers from a little bit of like like we're often ignored. We're often like when we talk about the great cities of the US, it's like you talk about New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago. It's like Houston, fourth largest city in the country, but often doesn't really get its flowers. And so we wanted someone who really felt like Houston. And then also like we wanted someone, the bigger challenge was like someone who shares our values, because we all know, I think the reason most journalists have been cautious and skeptical about these is because of what they perceive to be like a lack of maybe ethics or integrity among creators. So we wanted someone, and we knew that there were people like this out there. We knew that there were people like this who wanted to, have a platform so that, they could either fight misinformation or they could do like create content in a way that felt like it was honest. And so that was kind of the next step of this is finding someone who we felt like shared our same values and mission. We settled on food because Houston is a really big food city. And I know we were all kind of talking about this a little bit in advance. And it is one of the, like, Houston, one of the most diverse cities. I think one of the best food cities. I've lived in New York. I've, lived in LA. Like, I think it's a really great food city and it's often underrated. And also, our food team in particular had been kind of thinking about different ways to, like our journalism is not going to be on a paper. Like, we were thinking about doing food tours. We were thinking about, we always do these guides. We have this annual top 100 restaurants list that we launch, and we do it with an in-person event. So we settled on food because it felt like a really good fit given, how that kind of content flourishes on platforms like Instagram and TikTok, and then also just given our newsroom efforts. So around the same time, like to like back up a little bit, the reason also why we started thinking about API and everything is before we had collaborated with Shawn, before we even reached out to Shawn, there was speaking of the top 100 restaurants, there was one year, it was 2024, we were getting ready to launch the new list. And then we saw that on last year's top 100 restaurants list, we saw a bunch of conversions that just seemingly came out of nowhere. Like we were literally getting ready to launch the new list, and this outdated list from a year ago was getting all these conversions. And we're like, where is this happening? How is like, who's finding this? Where we've stopped promoting it months ago. And come to find out, there was a creator on TikTok who actually has quite a small following, but she was a creator on TikTok who made a video that said, hey, the Houston Chronicle just came out with their new top 100 list. I'm going to eat my way through it. And she featured like one of the restaurants. And so it was like, talk about in one fell swoop, like all the great things that we know could be unlocked from a partnership, and also some of the fears that we have as far as misinformation and getting the wrong, like, oh no, that's not the new list, like we haven't come out with the new list yet. Like it's like all in one fell swoop, like all the fears and also all the the great impact that we could unlock from this kind of partnership just coming about. And so we ended up reaching out to that creator because again, that's, hey, like, gentle correction, that's actually not the new list, but we are about to launch the new list. So if you want to come to our event, we're going to announce it. We ended up extending an invitation to her as well as Shawn and a few other creators at that time. And this was us all just like, as we go, we were thinking, like, why not invite them to the event? Like, it's it's something that anyone is allowed to come to anyways as part of the community. And so we did that. That's when we first met Shawn. And it was really, and so he got to meet, I think, our food team and our food editor and our reporters. And so that was a really great, like, and we'd all kind of knew him because of his content. So I hope I'm not like jumping around too much, but going back to when we had to sit down and we thought about the creators we could partner with, because we had that that experience with that first initial creator, and because we had met a bunch of creators at our event a few months prior. Shawn was actually someone who stood out to our food editor as someone who and you can kind of tell by the way he talks about his family's experience with news and newspapers and the Houston Chronicle. She said, I feel like out of all the people we met and the people we know in this industry, and like in Houston in particular, he's the only one I would go with. Like I feel like I can trust him. I feel like he has a similar shared mission and goals, but most importantly, I think he respects what we do. Like I think he really respects like journalists and the journalism that we do and the kind of work that we create. So that it was basically, that was it. Like I was, okay, so it's Shawn or bust. And then we started on working together, and it's been really great since then.
Now, when you invited all of these creators to your event, were there some of them that wanted to get paid to come to the event, or was that something you didn't deal with at all?
No, it was, well, you normally have to buy a ticket. So we basically said you could just come for free, and there's you don't have to create any content or any videos. Just like, if you want to come, just, yeah, you can come and let us know.
So really just inviting them to be part of your community and kind of see what happened from there.
Right.
Okay. Now, beyond Shawn's being respectful and interested in journalism, and for those of you who weren't here at the beginning of our call, that I think was the most heartening part of it for me, is here's somebody who really loves journalism and appreciates the work we do, and he's not in my circle, so he's not just being nice to me, and that was very heartwarming. But beyond that and the content that he's creating and his relatableness, was there anything else that made him the Shawn or bust guy in your mind?
That's a good question. I think, like, we also, as we think about like what makes a good partner, like we want to reach audiences that don't typically gravitate towards like the newspaper, what you think of as the newspaper audience. And it was really clear that Shawn had cultivated a following that was young and diverse. That was really important to us, not only in this experiment, but in general, as a news outlet in Houston. Like that's very, something that we're always thinking about. So I think also that alone, and I think like there are quite a few creators that are doing, like I will follow them, and I'll happily watch their videos and such. But one thing that I think meant a lot to the food editor in particular is that she noticed Shawn would, after he eats at a meal, he would share a picture of his receipt and or say, here's how much I paid. And so that to her, I think, was a really big thing, is that, like, that's kind of the ethics we have as food journalists, is that we pay for our meals. And not, it's something that we're really transparent to the readers about how much a meal costs. Oftentimes you see many creators go on these really elaborate dinners that are paid for by the restaurant, and kind of like, I think as far as like what we want to accomplish, it just wasn't for us.
Yeah, so it sounds like a very different model than the here's kind of a free fan mail, which we know that you will absolutely love it, because otherwise, why not?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Now, what does your relationship look like now? I know that when we talked before, you said you're creating one video a month. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you ideate and schedule and plan these things out and think about what you're going to focus on and how the relationship is structured?
Oh, do you want, I can I can grab that. So we just have like a standing monthly meeting where we chat at the beginning of each month just about like things that have, that we're thinking about. Shawn in particular always has a pulse on like what is happening in the city. So for example, when the World Cup was here, like he wanted to do some, something around the World Cup, FIFA Fan Fest. I mean, we were already thinking on parallel tracks there. I already wanted to do something there. So that was really, it just really begins with that conversation. And often some months I'm like, I don't have anything. What would you like to try? Or some months I come out, I'm like, hey, there is something I want to pitch you, but you have right of refusal. Like, it's really, I hope like I feel this way. I hope Shawn feels this way too, that it really feels like a true partnership.
Yeah.
All right. And how often are you making videos for the Chronicle?
Oh, myself, just once a month. I'd say
Okay.
once a month at this point. I know, Jennifer, we've talked about potentially like, some YouTube capabilities down the road, but yeah, right now, just one vertical video a month that gets posted on both TikTok and Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool to see though, because I feel like you can tell that the character, like I describe, I hate to say the characters is a word, but like, for example, like Bao is now like a character in the universe. Like, I don't know. It's like, I kind of treat my like audience as like a universe. And now it's like, people are like, even when I'm in public, I was like, oh, I saw Bao's, people will tell me they saw Bao's review, or they'll say like, they'll mention things on the side. So I think that's like a cool part of it as well. It's like, you're just, it's just like the overlap of the audiences.
Well, now that we brought Bao into the conversation, and I feel like there's probably a few listeners on this call that know Bao. He was in New York for many, many years. Talk to us about how you complement each other with the work that you're doing.
So I look at Bao in terms of, he is Houston's, food, like restaurant review critic. Like, he is the critic of Houston. And I think originally and this is what I mean by like trial by fire, in the sense of like when you're learning content, because when I started in 2021, 2022, I mean, I was doing, the traditional, oh, rate this 1 to 10, crumble cookie content. And basically, as you learn, as you kind of figure things out, and also as you talk to more people in the industry, especially when I moved back to Houston, like I have a rule that I typically work out of a different coffee shop every day, because I constantly run into people. I like talking to people, and that's how you just understand knowledge and the way to do things. And also, like, yes, I used to like showcase the receipt. I used to, treat myself as a reviewer, but naturally, as I got recognized more and more, like now, if I leave home, if I'm in Houston, I get recognized anywhere between 20 to 50 times a day. Like, genuinely, like I literally had to cancel my gym membership just because because it just interfered with the workouts too much. But the change has been where I treat Bao as like the food, like the restaurant critic of Houston. And it's like, hey, if you're looking for true journalism, review, that's who you should go check out. Whereas I consider myself more of just, hey, like a curator. Like, this is something cool that's going on in Houston. Like, I do food, I do things to do. I like vlogging as well. So I also didn't want to just pin myself in a hole, because my goal is to continue content for the rest of my life. And I want to make sure that I give myself flexibility to also like try new things and do new things. So that's kind of how I treat the relationship. Like, Bao is the Houston, I don't consider him just Houston Chronicles like restaurant critic. I consider him like Houston's only restaurant critic, because there's no one doing it, no one who's eating out 3 times in the same meal, completely paying for it all. There's literally no one remotely close. So I treat Bao as the gold standard.
Yeah, I've always been amazed at how he can eat so much.
Yeah, I was like, I saw a story the other day. He's like, he went to 5 restaurants. I was like, he plays tennis a lot though. He
Does, but I'm
works
like,
out.
my God, man, that's impressive.
Yeah.
All right. So, in terms of the videos that you've made, what are the ones that you stand out to you as being super successful or resonant with the audience, or that had a huge impact in terms of conversions and site traffic? And
Yeah,
Jennifer, chime in.
Yeah, I was like, Jennifer, you could probably tell on the back end, kind of stuff. But at least for me, even Houston Chronicle top 100, I always think that's just because it's an evergreen list, and the more people hear about it, the more that I think that they're just going to constantly go there. Like even for sometimes, like Jennifer, like even if it's not like a partnership video, I'll literally just quote the Houston Chronicle top 100, just sometimes in my videos, just because I think it's that that valuable of a hook, that valuable of a list. And I think you're going to start seeing it more and more happen in Houston. Like Jennifer, I'll send you the video. There's another food vlogger that I follow. He's newer, but he just quoted the Houston Chronicle top 100 as well. But yeah, it's just, at least that's what I found to be the most effective videos. But also that FIFA World Guide. I feel like just staying on top of trends and just realizing like, hey, anything that's mentioned with FIFA in it is just naturally going to gain a lot more traction, than anything else within that month. So those are what I found, at least on my end, in terms of what I thought performed the best. Doing well.
I noticed that I noticed a few of those too, where people started to like the format you created, Shawn, about the top 100. Like people started kind of riffing off of that, and you started setting a trend there, at least in the Houston creator world. And when it came, like I started seeing it referenced more, and so that is, I think, just really cool to see. And I think like top 100 restaurants is like a very iconic, like it is almost like a franchise for us in Houston. Like it's very iconic, and so that alone, like speaking about impact, like we knew that was going to be important. I'm glad that we did quite a few like collaborative videos on that. And there was one that we did. So when we talk about impact, there are a few things like that are that I'm thinking about, and I'm happy to share links in the chat. But when we did the API, when we did the API cohort as part of that, because we took great money, we did this, like we had to do like a write up, and we did. So there's actually a really great summary of like some of the conversion ones we did off of those first 3 initial videos. And of those first 3 videos, like we really wanted to see like, and it's just 3, so keep in mind this is a small sample size, but it's directional and it's something to get going. So like we were seeing, like actually we were getting some pretty decent, like if we had a video calling out our newsletter, we were getting some decent newsletter signups. And if we had a video on a guide that was hard paywalled, we actually got 6 conversions off of it. So there were some really good little wins that we saw. But as we've gone and done this more on like a month-to-month basis, I haven't, like there are some things that we're looking for. It's like there are some things that we're measuring and watching, but not every video. Like it is enough to me that more and more people know about top 100 restaurants. Like that is a really valuable franchise of ours. And as younger audiences, people who don't normally have the Houston Chronicle in their sphere know about this, that is a win. So that's not something that you can necessarily measure through like visits or conversion clicks. So there's that. And then another thing that I found really great, I was so excited when we did this one video. I'm glad that like Shawn and I, like we were talking about this and we got excited about it and it being great. So I'm like, it feels great when you talk about something and it works out. But Bao had written a rare 4-star review of a new restaurant in Houston. And thank you. Yeah, there we go. So thanks, Diana, for dropping in the chat. So he had written a rare and it's the kind of thing where he doesn't hand these out often. And I think when you look at like the star rating system, because of like Google reviews and because of Yelp, I think I've been desensitized to the idea that like anything that's not 5 stars is probably terrible. But in fact, like the way that our system has been, which is kind of built on like decades and decades of tradition, and there's always talk about how we should adjust it, but at least for now, this is the ratings where like even just getting 2 stars is great. Like having 2 stars from Bao is awesome. And so we did a video basically like explaining what that star rating, what Bao's star rating is and what he looks for, and how it is a rarity to see like 3 or 4 stars. And it was so cool to see the comments from that. Like first of all, it did great. Like that video just knocked it out of the park. But then also seeing the comments from that, like I loved in this API cohort, we talked about these trust signals. And in that you could see people commenting like, oh, that's really important. Like I didn't know that. And these are all trust signals that show that like, okay, this process that has been kind of like maybe behind the scenes, maybe cloak and dagger, maybe like something that you just had to know if you knew newspapers. Now we're starting to demystify that. Now we're starting to be more transparent with different audiences about it. And that's really valuable.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity, especially with audiences being so interested in behind the scenes, to actually pull back that curtain and explain to people how we do the things we do. Because the one thing that I've learned, I think, especially hanging out with my non-media friends, is they have no idea how any of this stuff actually works. And everyone seems to have a inkling that they do, but then they're like, oh, wow, that's how it's really done. So kudos to figuring that out. Now, in terms of measuring success, I know that you've talked a lot about things that are kind of beyond the metrics and making sure people know about these lists. How do you measure success for a project like this, and how do you communicate that across the newsroom?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, from that initial, like the first 3 videos that we did, I think we more than proved out to the rest of the room that this is worth trying and this is worth doing. And the great thing about this, I also want to make it clear because we're all, journalists in practice, and I want to kind of be really transparent about this. I'm sure this always comes up is how much does this cost? Like how much does this, because I think, creator payments are kind of the Wild West. Like it can really run the gamut. Shawn talked about Snapchat having like so much money. And I want to make it clear that like, as a local newsroom, we were actually really upfront with Shawn about like what we could and couldn't do. And the initial 3 videos was because of this grant that we had. But then, moving forward, I asked him like what would be a fair, and I wanted Shawn to feel like he was fairly compensated for the work he was doing. But I also wanted him to feel like, this is something that we could continue doing and it wasn't just this one-off thing. So I had asked him like what would be a fair amount that you would say. He said that he would be willing to do these videos, like one video for $1,000. And so that's why we have this ongoing as one video a month, because that equates to us basically what we would pay a freelancer for like a recurring column. And so the way that we're thinking about our work with creators is almost like, how we'd approach like digital freelancers for the new age, right? This is essentially like a freelancer working with us, on something, on an ongoing. So it's very analogous in many ways. And so that's kind of what, and so we felt like, okay, like when we're looking at some of, what we, as we unfortunately lose pages in print, there were a lot of freelancers that we kept on for spots in print that we just no longer need. So is this money being better spent, engaging this new freelancer in a new way? I think so. Like I think in the ways that we've been measuring it, we've kind of proved that out.
Now, who owns the rights to the footage and the videos created?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm not like that. That's a good question. That's something like I don't think we've talked about, Jennifer. But I'm of the opinion that like I don't know how I've always operated in both like business and life is just like if you ever need to go into the letter of the details. Well, I know this is like the letter of the details or anything like that, like the letters of a contract. Then that's a partner that you typically like weren't gonna be able to work with anyway. So like Jennifer, yeah, I was like, don't worry, we'll like whatever. If that becomes an issue, we'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
I think that's a good part about having a good relationship. Yeah.
I do think so. There was, it's like it's been so long since it's like when since we first did those 3 videos. But I remember before we could even do that, I had to go through Hearst Legal and come up with a new, and they essentially amended the freelancer contract to include video. And there were so there's I don't quite recall what that is because it was so long ago, but I do remember there was one instance where like we wanted to run an ad on a video he had made, and of course I asked Shawn, is it okay if we do this? And I think he approved like the ad handshake for it. And that was a one time. I don't think we've done it since, but that was kind of it. Yeah, it wasn't a big deal the way we sorted out, but yeah.
I will mention there are a lot of creators that are very very like nitpicky about that. Like I know a creator like like they'll negotiate literally every little detail. So that's just not how I personally like to work. I've always been a believer in long-term partnerships, and again there are specifics and everything, but I do want to point that out just in case like if anyone else is looking to partner with anyone else, because there are situations where like if you do an ad in the future, the creator might come back and be like, oh, that wasn't part of the contract, and then you'll have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. So now in terms of, compensation, does this work for you, Shawn, in terms of the time and effort that you're putting into it? Is this kind of a fair ballpark? So for other newsrooms that are thinking about working with creators, is this maybe a price point they might want to stick around to find somebody solid to build a relationship with?
Yes, I think so. I think at least from my end, this is the most enjoyable work as well in terms of everything. So I don't even treat it at like I'd say out of every brand deal we've done, because for example, Jennifer, if I'm doing a brand deal with McDonald's, it is very it's just very cut and dry. It's like what you're going for. It's I love working with them, but it's just like there's not as much creativity, or there's not much it's not a story. So I will say that. So that is part of it.
Oh, and as part of our agreement too, we pay for all the meals that he eats on the videos that
Yep.
he does. Yeah.
Nice. So he gets his expenses covered. That's a solid deal.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Now, in terms of getting the newsroom comfortable with having more creators working with them, Jennifer, was there anything that you did to help get people more comfortable with the fact that we're going to have Shawn now, working more closely with the Chronicle and potentially be working with more creators?
Yeah, I think so. The biggest thing was, of course, getting buy-in from the staff that would be working with him the most, and which is the food team. And I think, and it was truly like I meant it when I said that. Like when Jody said, "This is the only person I'll work with," I took it to heart. I'm like, great, like that's like I'll take it. It's better than I think at one point she had joked like, "I think there's some really great dog accounts. Can we collaborate with them?" And I'm like, no, this has to be a person. This cannot be. And so she was obviously joking, but there I would be lying if I said that there wasn't any reticence. Like there was a little bit of, just because it's people often do that if it's new. Like people often do that if it's the unknown. And then once we got through the first few, I think she realized, oh yeah, this could be really good. And then she's also been in in one of the videos that Shawn did. So she's really come around there, and then Bao is always like from day one has always been really excited to do this. And I think it's like, like I love to hear what Shawn said, that like Bao is now like a character in the universe, because I feel like this is it's like a natural progression of like Shawn is now a character in our universe. I'm like,
Right.
what in our following, and how we've branched out, and we've created, so we've also started a new food account separate from our flagship, where Bao is a frequent guest, or Shawn is a frequent guest on. So yeah, everyone is now like very cool with it. I think it's interesting though, because food is like, as far as a first thing to do, food has been a very good and safe topic to start on, and it made a lot of sense for us. What has been a little more interesting now, and Shawn, you don't even know about this part, is that like we've been thinking about how they're like, and this is the part that gets a little tricky, is like, okay, what would be our next sort of partnership collaboration if it's something like, right now our investigative team has this really, like, just published this really great story, and it has to do with pharmaceuticals and compound pharmacies and like kind of healthcare. There are a lot of healthcare medical creators out there. These are like sometimes physicians and like doctors in their own right, who have full followings because they want to have a platform to debunk, like weird things floating out there, or demystify things and whatnot. So there are several of these that we've been talking to, and it's so interesting because again, these are people who they just care, that like they care about the work, and they built a platform not to get famous necessarily, or to and these are doctors, like these are physicians who earn a good amount of, like they want to do this because they want to like it's like, it was in the age when like people were talking about ivermectin and like whatnot, like they want, and RFK Jr. So these are physicians who want to actively combat that. So that's kind of been really interesting. Nothing has come of it yet. It's just been a lot of talks, but again, it's the same premise. We're very careful. We're thinking about who shares our same mission and values, who can we work with, who are we seeing is really transparent in their brand deals and in their content deals. And yeah, it'll be really cool to see.
Now, how do you guys decide who you're going to suck into the Shawniverse?
Because we've done a video with Jody and Bao. So like Jody is the food editor, and then Bao's the restaurant critic. So I feel like Jennifer's like I feel like it's just y'all's call
I
typically.
know. Well, we've been talking about I need to still like I think she's down for it. Our editor-in-chief, Kellyanne Scott, we've been wanting to do like a day in the life. And I think she's a little hesitant, but I think she has such an interest. And again, talk about like
I will
making
totally
us
watch that video.
Mhm.
right. I'm like, I tell Kelly, I'm like, you want us like this is about breaking down those walls and making yourself seem more approachable. And what you do is really
Mhm.
interesting. And
Even your staff
all
will know
these
what you do all day.
but we said we just need to settle on like we need to find a day that's not like because the reality is much of our day is like her at a laptop in front of a Zoom meeting. So we're like
Yeah,
we need to find a somewhat interesting day, something where and she's not like like editing something that's like top secret.
yeah.
So we just need to find like a good time. But we've talked about doing that, so that'll be really cool.
Now, as you've been on the path to where you are now, were there any kind of challenges and roadblocks to getting this creator program up and running?
Um, no, I think honestly what really greased the wheels was the API cohort. Like we had to do it. We were part of this thing. Like we had to go and we had a lot of great support that way. Kelly, our editor-in-chief, has always been incredibly supportive and very pro like experimentation. Even just the job that I have in the newsroom, like that was all her and trying to, pave a path forward for experimentation and trying new things. So yeah, that's been really great. I think the biggest hurdle was probably like when it came down to it, the actual people who would be collaborating, like Jody, et cetera, like the actual right now, as I'm talking to these other people, like the actual investigative reporter being okay with his work being discussed in another way. That is probably the biggest thing. But it's one of those things where it's like, I'm gonna hold your hand. We're gonna be right there together. We're gonna figure it out, and nothing will be done without like us knowing that like we're proud of it and we're okay with it.
Okay. And we'll get to questions in just a minute. So, for anybody who's got questions, feel free to either raise your hand or leave them in the chat. But for Jennifer, if an organization wanted to start a creator partnership tomorrow, what would you suggest they do? How would you suggest they get started?
I mean, the first thing is leadership buy-in. I think, having buy-in from the top in terms of like this being and understanding why it's not just a numbers game. It's really about again reaching these new audiences that you couldn't reach before. It's about also like amplifying not and also not just amplifying your work, not just like here's the thing we did, can go and share it, but like also understanding that like to create a meaningful partnership, like there is a little bit of like we have to like trust each other and we have to work together on this. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. Budget, of course, just the realities of the situation. You're going to need money to pay these people. Please don't expect to have it done for free just for quote unquote access. Like please pay your people. And then
Yeah.
also I think if you're part of a larger organization, this took much longer than I expected as sorting out the contract
Mhm.
thing. Like you have to of course abide by all your company's legal, dot those I's and cross those T's. So that just took longer than I expected.
So I think a couple of the takeaways for me are find a grant with outside money that makes you look good so that everybody's happy to participate, and plan for it to take a little longer to pull together all of the details, especially if you're at a larger corporate entity. All
I think
right.
that's
Well,
fair.
we will get back into some audience Q&A. I know a few of you've got your hands up, and we've got some questions in the chat as well. I'm going to start with Todd. Todd has a whole bunch of very related questions for Shawn. So, Shawn, what Todd would like to know is, did you have a day job when you started this? Do you still have that day job? And if not, when did you quit? And then we'll keep going from there if you want to start with that.
Sure thing. Yeah. So actually, funny enough, that's why I have a hard stop at 2 because I have a work meeting. So this is technically my lunch break. But yeah, so I'm still working full time right now. I've worked basically full time since content. So after I graduated with my MBA, I spent a little bit of time studying abroad in London during the summer. But the moment I got back, I was doing interviews during that summer. So the moment I got back, had my full time job. So I've always have had a full time job doing content. I don't, the one thing I always tell people is like, if you become a full-time creator, the incentives change. It becomes an entirely different game, because let's say a scenario is like, if I let's say if I quit my job, well, now your entire income is dependent upon brand deals and everything. So are you willing to do stuff that is against your brand, or maybe stretch those lines? And that's just something that I personally didn't want to do. I think it could work in Abilene, as well as Houston. I just don't know the creator setup that y'all have there. But I mean, yeah, I think this kind of thing can work anywhere. And also, I'm just a huge personal finance guy. So everything from my full-time job primarily goes to savings, and I try to live as much through my influencer life. Yeah.
Okay, so you're kind of one of those flyer guys, it sounds like, almost.
A little chubby fire.
Okay. Now, coming back to the question that Todd had about Abilene, let's say, Shawn, that you moved to Abilene and wanted to start this all over again. Where would you start?
I'll tell you what I would do. I would post every day, no matter what. Like I would try to get into the Abilene market. Like I would try to see. I was like, okay, I'd go online. I type in Abilene in TikTok. I type in Abilene in Instagram. What are the top 3 things that are trending? Is it food? Is it something else? Is it a park? And then I would kind of create content around that pretty consistently. And then, I would just wait. I would just keep posting. I would be out and about. My rule is like never be at home. This is the one time I'm at home. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't coffee shop noise in the background. But literally, like,
I had an early editor tell me the same thing. He's like, best being a reporter is never be here.
Yeah, it's like it's the truth. Like I'll give like one example, Jennifer. Is like I'll always hear about restaurants closing down or opening at Donna's. If you go to Donna's, the cocktail bar, the people in the industry there always drink a little too much, and they always have a little bit have a lot to say. So if you kind of do stuff like that, like if you're just constantly out and about in Abilene, you're posting every day, and you're increasing in views. What I always tell people is like, if your views are staying the same, you're doing something wrong. Like you should be looking, if you have 10,000 views on one, like, okay, what did you learn from that? How can you improve from that to make sure your next video, gets the same amount of views? So it's constantly test and learn. The algorithms are always changing. And if you'll ever go on threads, so like I call it creator or influencer threads, you'll just see influencers complaining all the time saying, oh, view counts are down, whatever. It's like, no, view counts are down for you. It's just you're just doing the same thing that you were a few years ago. So that's the only difficult part. Attention spans are constantly changing. People's interests are constantly changing. And the number one thing I look at is just metrics. If the metrics are up, I know I'm in the right direction.
All right. Now we're going to ask you what can be a very personal question. How
Yeah.
do you deal with it when a video just kind of falls flat or doesn't do as well as you thought?
I think nowadays with the metrics, you can pretty much learn. Like what I try to do is catch people's attention in the first 3 seconds as much as possible. Like compared to like let's say in a newsroom, you're constantly A/B testing various like titles, and I'd say treat it like that, not clickbaity, but like you have to test. So what I'll do is sometimes I'll go in Claude, I'll go in ChatGPT, I'll be like, hey, create 10 versions of this title. And then I'll be like, which one do you think would be best? How should I structure it in CapCut? How can I structure it better? So various stuff like that. And it sucks when a video does bad, but I actually like it when that happens. I can almost tell people now like when a video is gonna do bad no matter what. Like it's like I just don't think it's gonna do well. But sometimes some videos surprise you. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw.
This all sounds very healthy, and I think a lot of good tips the rest of us can adapt when we have those, what did I do with this one moments. All right, we've got another question from Jeff Brady, who's had his hand up. Jeff, go for it.
Hey there. This is super interesting. Thank you for doing it. And the peek into your arrangement, I thank you for being so open about that. That's interesting as well. I'm assuming that before you started this, you both had pretty different editorial processes. And I'm wondering how you sort of made sure that they kind of aligned, or if you had to make any big changes to really do that. You've talked a little bit about this, but I'd like to hear more about how each of you kind of had to change to be able to work with each other.
Sure. I'm so at least for us, because Well, one of the things that makes this partnership so great is how easy it is. There are hardly any notes or edits that we give Shawn. And actually, I think there are some where I've seen and heard of these partnerships going awry is when there was maybe a little too much micromanagement from the newsroom side of what a video ought to look and sound like, which is it should sound like this or that, which is often how a newsroom would do it. But again, what you're trying to do, like, again, the benefit of this being a true partnership is that you want it to be in their voice. Like, you want it to be in their, like, because they have the audience that is different from yours. You want them to say it to their followers the way that they would have said it. So what we really liked about, like, and I like the way that we do this is that we talk about the idea, we talk about the video concepts, we kind of do some pre-editing, really, if it's really that, and the shaping of what it might look like. But then after that, like, when he is done filming and he is done editing and he sends back a version, it is like really light edits of like, oh, could you add, like, or maybe I think there was one video where he had misspelled one word and we had flagged that, and that was really the only change in that video. And maybe in another video we're like, oh, like, do you mind actually, making the call to action like at this point, and like, but again, really minor notes, sometimes no notes at all. And there's a lot of trust there, which I think we're really lucky that, like, we really liked his voice to begin with, and we knew that, like, even the videos that he was already creating we really enjoyed. So but it doesn't happen with everyone, and I think that's where, like, when you talk about what makes a good partnership, it's also like, if you're going to have to do a lot of heavy editing to what they're already creating, then maybe it's not a good partnership to begin with. So I don't know how you feel, Shawn, about that, if we're good partners or not.
No, it's easy. It is truly very easy. There are some situations, some like partners where it can be very difficult. And because there's one thing that I think y'all will probably learn as you work with creators is creators are very specific about their style and their way of doing things. And even I talk to other creators and they're like, they hate, like, having to make multiple rounds of edits. Like, if you have to make 3 rounds of edits, that's like the worst thing in the world. And I agree. Like, Jennifer, like, I think the max we did was like one, and like sometimes I misspell words, or even in a caption, occasionally, like, I just had the wrong word, where it should have been somewhere else. So that's why I think if y'all like a creator, or if you guys are already aligned, it makes your life so much easier, I think.
All right. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. Shawn, you set me up perfectly for this next question. What do you wish newsrooms understood about creators before reaching out and trying to work with them?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one, because a lot of times, like, every creator's incentive is different. If you ever want to know a creator, just go to their threads or Twitter. I always say, like there are some creators that you think they're super authentic, everything, and then you go on their threads or Twitter, and it's like their entire optimization is just based on what will get them the most money, or what will, like. So I would say, like, sometimes, like, like, creators treat those, like, social medias as very separate entities. So you can have a lot of fun by vetting. And I would just make sure you're vetting your creators on that front to make sure that they're that they have the right intentions in mind. Yeah.
Now, what about, I know a lot of entities. I do a lot of travel work and travel content creation, and a lot of the creators that I know are offended because they get asked to do a whole lot of work for free. Are there any things like that that you think that newsrooms need to be wary of when they're trying to work with creators, or things that come across as just absolutely disrespectful?
I think how the Houston Chronicle did it was right when they initially invited a group of creators, because it's just an event, right? Like, there wasn't an expectation of, like, hey, it's like, hey, if you want to post, you can. At least that's from what I remember.
Mhm.
But I would say, like, if you can do it in some kind of event framing rather than like some kind of ask in the beginning, I think that's like the easiest way. I think the tough part is, like, I think a lot of creators are cool with events. They're always down to go to cool events.
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit tougher, when it's like, hey, do like 2 reels for this, and it's like
Right.
completely free, and then yeah, that's where I think it might get a little bit tougher.
Okay. All right. We've got one more question from Todd, and then we will wrap things up. Jennifer, does the Chronicle want to use creators for general assignment projects, or mainly niche topics like food, healthcare, lifestyle things, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, our plans are really just to take it really, we want to be really thoughtful about this. We understand in the same way that when you hire a freelancer, they are in some ways representatives of you and your brand and your newsroom. So the plan right now is like, of course, we're continuing collaborating with Shawn on food and things to do in Houston, and possibly YouTube is a possibility for the future. I mentioned before the investigative reporting and like a healthcare topic, and working with maybe some credible healthcare influencers and creators. I think right now it's like, I think, because these are paid assignments, I think it's like we just have to think about how thoughtfully we're structuring these. Like, what is going to have impact? What is it that, again, like we're reaching an audience that is younger and diverse? Like, what would they be interested in? Like, how? So it's a little bit of being strategic and calling the shots. That currently does not include general assignment reporting. Like, I think that's probably too broad. And what we're trying to do is just really being strategic about it.
Cool. Well, I think, thank you guys for joining us. My big takeaways were, take things easy, have a casual meetup, see if you hit it off, and then see if you can find a partner that really aligns with you. And this might not be the biggest audience or the most referral traffic, but someone whose ethos and work really resonates with what you're doing, and who really respects the work that you do. So I think that, to me, is kind of the biggest takeaway from all of this, is there's obviously a mutual admiration and working towards some similar goals and very similar approaches to work. So maybe thinking about some of those things as you're vetting potential creator partnerships as well in the future. All right. Well, I think we are mostly through our questions. Is there anything else either of you would want to add, Jennifer or Shawn, particularly for newsrooms that might be a little apprehensive as they try and go down this path, or they might have a lot of internal friction that's making it harder for them to pursue?
Oh, actually, one thing I will point out is always make sure that the creators aren't faking likes, views, or shares or anything like that.
Mhm.
There's a lot of creative ways that influencers can do that. And if typically, like, I always tell people, if somebody looks like they're doing 100,000 views of video in Abilene and their content is only Abilene, everyone should know them in town. Like, if they're doing that, so like I'd say just vet like carefully when you're doing that, because I've seen a lot of small businesses get screwed over in that way. I know newsrooms, like, you guys have a different vetting system. It's probably y'all are more trained in that, but that's one thing I'd flag.
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of tools that can highlight those issues when they do exist. One thing that I tell people who have no tools and no real budget for this is take a look at follower count and engagement. If someone has 100,000 followers and they're only getting 100 views on a video or 2 or 3 likes, that to me is a red flag, that those might not all be actual human beings who are ultimately what you guys want to reach in newsrooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my takeaway is, again, having that mutual trust, having that mutual like this is a part, like, that's been really key, I think, for us. And then also you have to also understand that, like, just because they don't have the title of journalist doesn't mean that they can't do acts of journalism. Like, I very much believe that so many creators out there are they're digging into things the way that they with the tools that they have, maybe not the training or whatever, but they're doing these acts of an API they called acts of journalism, which I think is really funny and a great way to put it. But so really kind of giving them that same respect, because we're not all that different, right? Like, we're in many ways more alike than we are different.
Oh yeah, and I think Shawn is a journalist who's just starting to realize that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm game. I'm
Hey.
down.
All right. Well, thank you both for being so candid with us and taking the time to speak with us today. And we will hopefully see you on a future call.
Thanks,
And
y'all.
we'll send out notes to everybody on the call, so you'll get everything, including links, resources, examples, and all that jazz.
Cool.